A private jet touched down in Detroit just after sunrise, carrying billionaire real estate investor Marcus Hale home for the first time in 12 years. The city remembered him as the man who escaped poverty. The business world knew him as a millionaire many times over. But less than 30 minutes after landing, Marcus found himself standing behind an abandoned shopping center, staring at an elderly woman digging through trash. Her coat was torn, her hands shook from the cold. Then she turned toward him. Marcus felt his heart stop. The woman searching through garbage was his mother, and she looked terrified that he had found her. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Marcus thought he was returning home to celebrate success. Instead, he walked into a secret buried for more than 3 decades. 3 hours earlier, everything had felt different. Marcus had been sitting comfortably inside his private jet, reviewing documents from a corporate acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Reporters were already calling it one of the biggest real estate deals of the year. His assistant kept sending congratulatory messages. Investors wanted interviews. Business partners wanted meetings. But Marcus barely looked at his phone. Detroit was appearing beneath the clouds, and for the first time in years, his thoughts weren't about business. They were about his mother. He had not visited her in person for 12 years. At first, life had gotten in the way, then work had taken over. 1 year became 3, 3 became 7. Eventually, returning home became something he always planned to do next month. Still, he had made sure she never struggled financially. Every month, money was transferred into her account. Every holiday, flowers arrived at her house. Every birthday, he called. He told himself he was being a good son. Now he wanted to surprise her. No assistants, no cameras, no warning, just a son finally coming home. After landing, Marcus rented a car instead of using a chauffeur. He wanted the visit to feel normal. The city looked older than he remembered. Empty storefronts lined some streets. Old brick buildings stood beside new developments. Memories followed him everywhere. Then traffic slowed near an abandoned shopping center on the edge of town. Marcus glanced toward the parking lot. That was when he saw her. At first he thought she was just another homeless woman. An elderly figure stood behind a rusted dumpster, bending down repeatedly. But something about her posture felt familiar. Marcus pulled over. His chest tightened. No, it couldn't be. He stepped out of the car and walked closer. The woman turned. Time stopped. "Mom?" The word escaped before he realized he had spoken. The woman froze. For a second neither moved, then her eyes widened. Not with joy, not with relief, with fear. Marcus had imagined this reunion many times. His mother crying, his mother smiling, his mother hugging him. He had never imagined her looking frightened. "Mom, it's me." She lowered her eyes immediately. Her hands moved nervously. She took a step backward. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced behind the dumpster, then toward the parking lot, as if checking whether someone was watching. Marcus noticed her coat. It was stained and worn thin. Her shoes looked old. One sole was partially detached. Nothing made sense. He sent her enough money to live comfortably. More than comfortably. "Are you hungry?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. No. It was the first word she had spoken. Marcus looked inside the pile she had been searching. There were broken boxes, rotting paper, rusty metal scraps, no food, no bottles, nothing anyone could sell for money. His mother's wasn't collecting trash. She was searching for something specific. "What are you looking for?" Marcus asked. Again, she avoided his eyes. "I need to go." "What do you mean you need to go?" "Mom, look at you." She took another step back. The distance between them felt larger than 12 years. Marcus reached out instinctively but stopped before touching her arm. For some reason, he felt like a stranger. "Please tell me what's happening." Her lips trembled. For a moment, Marcus thought she might finally explain everything. Instead, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Then she turned and walked away, not quickly, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone carrying a burden too heavy to share. Marcus stood frozen. He watched her disappear around the corner of the abandoned building. Questions crashed through his mind. Where was she living? Why was she dressed like that? Why had she seemed afraid? And what had she been searching for? By the time he got back into his car, the excitement of returning home was gone. In its place was dread. That evening, Marcus sat alone in a hotel suite overlooking downtown Detroit. The city lights blurred beyond the windows. His laptop glowed on the table. He had spent hours reviewing bank transfers. Every payment, every deposit, every record from the last 12 years. At first he thought there had to be a mistake. Then he saw a name appear again and again and again. Raymond Hale, his uncle. Marcus leaned forward, his pulse quickened. The documents showed something impossible. Every dollar he had sent to support his mother had been routed through accounts legally controlled by Raymond. Marcus stared at the screen. Then he noticed the date on the authorization forms, the signatures, and one final detail that made his blood run cold. His mother had signed them herself. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time. The hotel room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. His laptop remained open on the table, illuminating pages of financial records that suddenly felt impossible to understand. His mother had signed them, not once, not twice, dozens of times. The signatures appeared on authorization forms, account transfers, and legal permissions granting financial control to Raymond Hale. Marcus leaned back and rubbed his eyes. Something was wrong. His mother had always been cautious. She read every document carefully. She distrusted complicated paperwork. Years ago, she had once spent an entire afternoon reviewing a simple insurance form before signing it. Yet according to these records, she had willingly handed control of everything to Raymond. It didn't fit. He reached for his phone and dialed her number. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. A third time. Still nothing. Marcus lowered the phone and looked out the window. For the first time since arriving in Detroit, he felt genuine fear. Not fear of losing money, not fear of business failure. Fear that he didn't know his own family anymore. The next morning, he drove to the small apartment building listed under his mother's address. The place shocked him. It was old and poorly maintained. Paint peeled from the exterior walls. Several windows had been boarded up. Rust stained the stair railings. Marcus sat in the car for several seconds. This wasn't where she was supposed to be living. Not after 12 years of support. Not after everything he had sent. He climbed the stairs and knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. As he turned away, an elderly woman opened the neighboring door. "You looking for Helen?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "She's not home. Do you know where she went?" The woman hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. "She leaves early most mornings. Where does she go?" The woman looked uncomfortable. "Different places." "What kind of places?" She glanced around the hallway before answering. "Storage lots, old properties, construction sites, places being torn down." Marcus frowned. "Why?" "I don't know, she never says." The woman paused. "But she always looks worried." That answer only created more questions. Marcus thanked her and left. An hour later, he was sitting inside a downtown law office. The attorney reviewing the documents was someone he trusted. Daniel Porter had handled several corporate acquisitions for Marcus over the years. Daniel adjusted his glasses while reading the paperwork. Everything appears legitimate. Marcus felt frustration rise immediately. "Legitimate? I'm talking about the signatures. You're telling me my mother willingly gave away control of her finances?" Daniel continued reading. "Legally speaking, yes." Marcus stood and walked toward the window. "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to make sense. It does to me." Daniel looked up. "Then you're asking the wrong question." Marcus turned. "What question should I be asking?" The attorney folded the papers. "Not whether she signed." He tapped the documents. "Why she signed." The answer followed Marcus for the rest of the day. Why? Why would a woman accept poverty while millions passed through accounts connected to her name? Why would she avoid him? Why had she looked terrified behind that dumpster? And what had she been searching for? By evening, Marcus finally made a decision. If his mother wouldn't talk to him, he would talk to Raymond. The meeting took place at Raymond's house on the northern side of the city. The property wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable. Too comfortable. A new SUV sat in the driveway. The landscaping was immaculate. Fresh renovations were visible throughout the exterior. Marcus noticed everything. Every detail made him angrier. Raymond opened the door before Marcus knocked, almost as if he had been expecting him. "You finally came home." Marcus stepped inside. "We need to talk." Raymond nodded calmly. "I figured." Neither man sat down immediately. The silence between them felt old, heavy. Raymond eventually motioned toward the dining room. Marcus remained standing. Why did my mother sign over control of her money? Raymond sighed, straight to the point, because she trusted me. Marcus laughed bitterly. That answer doesn't work anymore. It happens to be true. Marcus threw copies of the documents onto the table. Then explain this. Raymond glanced at them. No surprise crossed his face. No panic. Nothing that bothered Marcus more than a denial would have. You've been controlling her finances for years, yes. You let her live in that apartment. Yes, you watched her search through garbage. Something finally changed in Raymond's expression. Just for a second. A flicker. Then it disappeared. You saw that. I saw my mother digging through trash. Raymond looked away. Things aren't always what they appear to be. Marcus slammed his hand against the table. Stop talking in riddles. The older man remained calm, almost too calm. You think I'm the villain. You stole from her. I protected this family. Marcus stared at him. Protected? The words sounded absurd. Raymond walked to a cabinet and removed a bottle of water. His hands looked steady. His voice remained steady too. You've been gone a long time, Marcus. 12 years, long enough to miss a lot. I never stopped supporting her. No, Raymond nodded. You just stopped showing up. The words landed harder than Marcus expected. He hated that, because part of him knew they were true. For a moment neither spoke. Then Raymond said something that made Marcus forget every other thought. Have you asked your mother about Eleanor? Marcus frowned. Eleanor? Raymond studied his face carefully. So carefully it felt deliberate. You really don't know. Know what? Raymond didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back toward the table and picked up one of the documents. His eyes lingered on the signature at the bottom. Helen Hale, Marcus's mother. Finally, Raymond spoke. The problem isn't that your mother trusted the wrong person. What does that mean? Raymond looked directly at him. For the first time all evening, there was something like pity in his eyes. The woman you're trying to save isn't the woman you think she is. Marcus felt a chill run through him. What are you talking about? Raymond shook his head. No, tell me. Not yet. Marcus stepped forward. I'm done with secrets. Raymond's expression hardened. Then prepare yourself. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Raymond slowly pushed the documents back across the table. Then he delivered the sentence that would follow Marcus long after he left that house. The woman you pity helped create this disaster. Marcus left Raymond's house long after sunset. The drive back to his hotel felt endless. Detroit's streetlights blurred past his windshield, but he barely noticed them. Raymond's words kept replaying in his head. The woman you pity helped create this disaster. It sounded impossible. His mother had spent most of her life helping other people. She had worked hard, sacrificed endlessly, and never complained. Even when Marcus was struggling during his first years away from home, she had always sounded strong on the phone. Yet something had changed. Or maybe something had always been hidden. Back in his suite, Marcus opened his laptop again. Sleep was impossible. If Raymond wouldn't tell him the truth, he would find it himself. He began searching through public records. Property records, court filings, archived newspaper mentions, anything connected to his family. Hours passed. Most of what he found seemed ordinary. Then one name appeared, Eleanor Brooks. Marcus frowned. The name meant nothing to him. He opened the record, a property transfer from nearly 30 years earlier. The document involved his mother's maiden name. That caught his attention immediately. He opened another file. The same name appeared again, Eleanor Brooks. Then another, and another. The deeper he searched, the stranger it became. Eleanor's name seemed connected to old legal paperwork involving his family. Not often, just enough to leave traces, like someone had tried to erase her but failed completely. Marcus sat back. Who was she? Why had nobody ever mentioned her? And why did Raymond seem convinced she mattered? The next morning he drove to see his mother again. This time she answered the door. The apartment looked worse in daylight. A small table, worn furniture, an aging refrigerator that hummed loudly in the corner. Marcus hated every second of it. His mother invited him inside but barely looked at him. The same fear remained in her eyes, the same tension. How long have you lived here? Marcus asked. A few years. A few years? She nodded. Marcus walked slowly through the apartment. Nothing reflected the life he thought she was living. Nothing. Not one sign, not one purchase, not one comfort. Where had the money gone? His mother folded her hands nervously. You shouldn't be worrying about me, Marcus turned. I'm your son. The words came out sharper than intended. She lowered her eyes. For a moment guilt crossed her face, then it vanished. Marcus noticed something else, a stack of papers partially hidden beneath a kitchen drawer. His mother quickly slid the drawer shut. Too quickly, Marcus said nothing, but he noticed. They sat together in uncomfortable silence. Finally he asked the question, "Who is Eleanor Brooks?" The reaction was immediate. His mother froze, the color drained from her face. Marcus had expected surprise, maybe confusion. Instead he saw fear, real fear, the same fear he had seen behind the dumpster. She stood abruptly. "Where did you hear that name?" Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "So you know her?" His mother moved toward the sink. Her hands trembled. "Who told you about Eleanor Raymond?" A long silence followed. His mother closed her eyes just for a second. Then she whispered something Marcus almost missed. He should have stayed quiet. Marcus stared at her. "What does that mean?" She shook her head. "No, Mom." Her voice cracked. Marcus had never heard that tone before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it sounded like panic. "You don't understand, then help me understand." She turned away. Marcus saw tears gathering in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. After another long silence she spoke. "Some things belong in the past." Marcus felt frustration building. Not if they're destroying people in the present. She looked at him then, really looked at him. For a brief moment he thought she might finally tell him everything. Instead she whispered, "Please stop digging." The request shocked him. Not because she asked, because she sounded desperate. As if she feared what would happen if he continued. Marcus left more confused than ever. That afternoon he drove across town. Old neighborhoods, old records offices, anyone who might remember something. Most people knew little. Some remembered his mother, some remembered Raymond. Nobody wanted to discuss Eleanor. Until he met a retired property clerk named Walter Simmons. Walter was in his 70s and spent most mornings drinking coffee at a diner near the county building. Marcus showed him a copy of one of the old records. Walter adjusted his glasses, his eyes narrowed. "I remember that name." Marcus leaned forward. "Eleanor Brooks?" Walter nodded slowly. "Been a long time. Who was she?" Walter looked uncertain. "As far as I remember, she was family." Marcus's heart skipped. "What kind of family?" Walter. "People talked. About what?" Walter lowered his voice. "They said she disappeared." Marcus frowned. "Disappeared?" "Not literally." Walter stirred his coffee. "It was stranger than that." "How?" Walter searched his memory. "One year people talked about her all the time. The next year nobody mentioned her." Marcus felt tension tighten in his chest. "Why?" Walter shook his head. "No idea." Then he paused. Actually, Marcus waited. Walter pointed toward the document. "I always thought it was odd." "What?" "Her name kept showing up in paperwork, but nobody wanted to acknowledge she existed." Marcus left the diner with more questions than answers. But now one thing was clear. Eleanor wasn't some random person. She belonged to the family, and somebody had worked very hard to erase her. That evening Marcus returned to his mother's apartment unannounced. He wasn't planning a confrontation. He simply wanted answers. The apartment door was slightly open. His mother wasn't inside. Marcus hesitated. Then he noticed something on the kitchen table, a single envelope, old, yellowed with age. His mother's handwriting covered the front. One name, Eleanor. Marcus stepped closer, his breath caught. The envelope had never been mailed. The stamp was still attached. Carefully, he turned it over. The seal had already been broken years ago. His hands trembled. For a moment, he considered walking away, respecting his mother's privacy. Then he remembered her fear, the missing money, the hidden records, the name nobody would explain. Slowly, Marcus pulled the letter from the envelope. The first line shattered whatever certainty he still had about his family. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I have finally found the courage to tell you how deeply sorry I am." Marcus stared at the first line for a long time. The apartment around him seemed to disappear. All that remained was the yellowed paper in his hands. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I have finally found the courage to tell you how deeply sorry I am." His mother had apologized before she explained anything. That alone frightened him. People apologized for accidents. They apologized for mistakes. They apologized for betrayals. Slowly, Marcus continued reading. The letter was written in shaky handwriting. Some sections were crossed out. Others looked as if they had been rewritten several times. Every sentence felt heavy. His mother wrote that she thought about Eleanor every day. She wrote that not a week had passed without regret. She wrote that she wanted to explain the truth but never found the courage. Marcus turned the page. His pulse quickened. The next paragraph changed everything. His mother wrote that years ago she had made a choice she believed would save the family, a choice that ended up destroying it. But she never explained what that choice actually was. The details were missing. Instead, the letter became more emotional. She spoke about guilt, about fear, about wishing she could undo the past. Marcus read every word twice, then 3 times. The answers weren't there, only pain, only regret, only evidence that Eleanor mattered far more than anyone had admitted. Near the bottom of the second page, another sentence caught his attention. "You lost something that should have been yours." Marcus sat frozen. Something that should have belonged to Eleanor. What? Money? Property? Part of the family itself? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. She turned Rick up. His stomach dropped. The page was gone, torn away. Only a jagged strip remained attached to the binding fold. Someone had removed it. Recently, the paper was cleaner than the rest. Marcus felt a chill. The missing page probably contained the truth, and someone had made sure he wouldn't see it. The front door suddenly opened. Marcus looked up. His mother stepped inside carrying 2 grocery bags. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her eyes landed on the letter. The color drained from her face. She dropped one of the bags. An orange rolled across the floor. "You read it?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Marcus stood slowly. "Who is Eleanor?" His mother didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the fallen groceries with trembling hands. Marcus walked closer. "I deserve an answer." "No." Her response came instantly. Sharp, defensive, unlike anything he had heard from her before. "No? You shouldn't have read that." Marcus almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the situation had become absurd. For days everyone had told him to stop asking questions. His mother, Raymond, people in town, everyone. Yet nobody would explain why. "What are you protecting?" Marcus asked. His mother turned away. "Nothing. That's not true." Silence. Marcus saw her shoulders tighten. He knew she was lying. The problem was understanding why. Finally, she placed the groceries on the counter. Then she looked directly at him. Her eyes were full of exhaustion. "Please leave this alone." Marcus shook his head. "I can't. You can." No, a painful silence filled the apartment. His mother looked older than she had yesterday. Older than she had behind the dumpster. The secret was crushing her. Marcus could see it, but she still wouldn't release it. Finally she whispered, "Some truths hurt more than lies." Then she walked into her bedroom and closed the door. The conversation was over. Marcus left feeling worse than before. That night he returned to his hotel. Instead of sleeping, he made a decision. If nobody would tell him the truth, he would find Eleanor himself. The next morning he hired a private investigator, not because he lacked resources, because he needed someone familiar with old records, address histories, and legal trails. By noon the search had begun. Marcus spent the day reviewing everything he had gathered so far: property records, court documents, archive directories, old tax filings. Most of it led nowhere. Then the investigator called. "We found her." Marcus stood immediately. "What? Eleanor Brooks, Chicago." His heart pounded. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." The investigator sent an address, a small apartment building on the north side of Chicago. Marcus booked a flight within the hour. The next morning he landed in Illinois. Rain covered the city. Gray clouds hung low above the skyline. Marcus drove directly to the address. The building wasn't dangerous, but it was worn. A place people moved into when life hadn't gone according to plan. He sat in the car for several minutes. Suddenly doubt hit him. What if Raymond had lied? What if Eleanor refused to see him? What if she knew nothing? Still, he walked to the entrance. Apartment 4B. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Footsteps approached. The door opened a few inches. A woman stood behind it, mid-60s, sharp eyes, gray streaks in dark hair. Marcus immediately noticed something unsettling. She looked familiar, not identical, but familiar, a resemblance he couldn't explain. The woman studied him carefully. "Can I help you?" Marcus swallowed. "My name is Marcus Hale." Her expression changed only slightly, but enough. She knew the name. "Okay, I came from Detroit." The woman's face hardened instantly. She started closing the door. Marcus reacted. "Please wait." No, I just need 5 minutes. The door moved another inch. Marcus spoke quickly. I know, Raymond. The movement stopped. The woman's eyes narrowed. Then Marcus said the one thing that finally made her freeze. I know my mother. Silence. Rain tapped softly against the hallway windows. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Eleanor laughed. Not warmly, not kindly. The sound carried decades of bitterness. Your mother. Marcus felt uneasy. You know her? Eleanor stared at him. I spent 30 years trying to forget her. The words landed like a punch. Marcus didn't know what to say. Eleanor opened the door slightly wider, just enough to study his face. Her eyes lingered, longer than before. Something strange flickered across her expression. Confusion, recognition, maybe both. Then she looked away. What do you want from me? Marcus took a breath. The truth. Eleanor laughed again. Then you're talking to the wrong family. She started closing the door. Then she suddenly stopped. Her eyes dropped toward the folder Marcus carried beneath his arm. The old letter was partially visible inside. The color vanished from her face. She grabbed the edge of the doorframe. Where did you get that? Marcus followed her gaze. The letter? Eleanor nodded slowly. For the first time she looked afraid. Not angry, afraid. Marcus pulled the envelope halfway out. Eleanor stared at the handwriting. Then tears appeared in her eyes. She whispered 4 words that made Marcus's entire world tilt. She actually kept it. Eleanor's eyes never left the envelope. For several seconds, she seemed unable to breathe. Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, holding the letter halfway out of the folder. He had expected anger, maybe resentment. What he saw instead looked closer to grief. She actually kept it, Eleanor repeated. Her voice cracked on the final word. Marcus lowered the envelope slightly. You knew about this letter? A bitter smile crossed Eleanor's face. I waited for it. The answer hit harder than he expected. Eleanor stepped back from the doorway and stared into the apartment behind her. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a television played faintly through a neighboring wall. Finally, she sighed. You'd better come inside. Marcus entered carefully. The apartment was small but neat. Bookshelves lined one wall. A sewing machine sat near the window. Everything looked modest, but unlike his mother's apartment, nothing felt abandoned. Eleanor pointed toward a chair. Marcus sat. She remained standing. How much has Raymond told you? Very little. How much has your mother told you? Almost nothing. Eleanor laughed quietly. That sounds about right. The room fell silent. Marcus pulled the envelope from the folder and placed it carefully on the table between them. Eleanor stared at it as if it were something alive. I thought she destroyed it years ago. She kept it hidden. I can see that. Marcus leaned forward. Who are you? The question lingered between them. Eleanor looked away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. I was part of that family once. That's not an answer. No, it isn't. Marcus felt frustration rising again. Every conversation seemed trapped behind locked doors. Every answer came wrapped inside another mystery. Eleanor sat down slowly. Then she surprised him. You have her eyes. Marcus blinked. What? Your mother's eyes? The observation felt strangely intimate. Too intimate. Marcus said nothing. Eleanor folded her hands together. I spent years wondering what kind of man you became. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. You knew about me? Of course. The answer stunned him. You knew who I was all this time? Yes. Then why didn't you contact me? A shadow crossed her face. Because your mother made sure that never happened. Marcus stared at her. The accusation felt too direct, too certain. Eleanor opened a drawer beside the couch. After a moment, she removed a worn folder. The edges were frayed. The papers inside looked decades old. She placed it on the table. Marcus noticed immediately that several documents carried his mother's signature. Others carried Raymond's. His pulse quickened. What is this? Evidence. Of what? Eleanor met his eyes. Of the day I stopped existing. The words sent a chill through him. Marcus opened the folder. Inside were legal notices, property documents, financial records, settlement agreements. Most were difficult to understand without context. Then he found something else. A family affidavit. His mother's name appeared near the bottom. Raymond's name appeared beneath it. Eleanor tapped the page. Keep reading, Marcus did. The further he went, the more confused he became. Certain sections had been blacked out. Other portions referenced private family assets and inheritance rights. One sentence appeared repeatedly. Transfer of beneficiary status. Marcus looked up. What does this mean? Eleanor laughed softly. There was no humor in it. It means someone decided I didn't belong anymore. Marcus felt the room grow smaller. What are you saying? Eleanor leaned back. For the first time since meeting her, she looked exhausted. 30 years ago, there was a legal dispute involving property, investments, and family assets. Marcus listened carefully. Your mother and Raymond claimed they were protecting the family. From what? Eleanor hesitated. That's the question, isn't it? Marcus felt another wall rise. Again, always another wall. What exactly happened? Eleanor shook her head. I can't prove all of it, but you believe something. I know something. The certainty in her voice made Marcus uncomfortable. Eleanor stood and walked toward a bookshelf. She removed an old photograph from a frame, then she handed it to him. Marcus examined it carefully. The picture was decades old. 3 adults stood together outside a house. One was clearly his mother, another was Raymond. The third was a younger version of Eleanor. All 3 appeared happy. All 3 appeared connected, family. Marcus looked closer, then his breath caught. His mother and Eleanor shared unmistakable similarities. The same jawline, the same eyes, the same expression. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Marcus lowered the photograph slowly. You look like her. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Neither spoke for several seconds. Rain continued falling outside. Finally, Marcus asked the question he had been avoiding. Who are you to my mother? Eleanor stared directly at him. When she answered, her voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm her daughter. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus didn't speak, couldn't. His mind struggled to process the words, daughter. Not cousin, not distant relative, not family friend. Daughter, his mother's daughter, his sister. Eleanor watched the shock spread across his face. I told you, she said quietly. I used to belong to that family. Marcus stared at the photograph again. The similarities suddenly became obvious. The pieces began shifting into place. Not fitting yet, but moving. Why didn't she tell me? Eleanor looked away. Because telling you would mean explaining everything else. Marcus leaned forward. What else? Eleanor's expression hardened. There was a deal. The words came out flat, cold. A deal that changed all our lives. Marcus felt tension tighten through his chest. What kind of deal? Eleanor shook her head. I don't know every detail. Then what do you know? I know your mother signed something. Marcus immediately thought of the missing page from the letter. The documents, the signatures, the fear in his mother's eyes. Eleanor continued. After that, I disappeared from the family. Marcus looked down at the photograph. The smiling faces now felt haunting, like evidence from a crime scene. Why? Eleanor swallowed. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her voice. That's the part I've spent 30 years trying to understand. A long silence followed. Then Marcus made a decision. He removed his phone. What are you doing? I'm done guessing, Eleanor frowned. Marcus opened his contacts. Then he selected one number. His mother's. Eleanor immediately stood. No. Marcus looked up. Why not? Because she's terrified. Of what? Eleanor didn't answer. Marcus pressed call anyway. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his mother answered. Her voice sounded shaky. Marcus? He took a breath. I'm with Eleanor. Silence. Complete silence. Marcus thought the call had dropped. Then he heard something. A sharp intake of breath followed by quiet crying. His mother's voice returned a few seconds later. Weak. Broken. Please don't let her leave before I get there. And then she said something neither of them expected. There's something I never told either of you about Raymond. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. The call had ended seconds earlier, but neither he nor Eleanor moved. The room felt different now. Smaller. Heavier. Eleanor stood near the window with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had heard every word. She wants to come here? Eleanor asked quietly. Marcus nodded. She's already driving. A bitter smile appeared on Eleanor's face. 30 years. Marcus looked at her. What? 30 years without a visit. 30 years without a phone call. 30 years without a letter. Her eyes drifted toward the envelope on the table, and now she wants to explain everything in one afternoon. Marcus couldn't argue. Part of him felt the same frustration, but another part remembered the fear in his mother's voice. For the first time, she sounded less like someone protecting a secret and more like someone running out of time. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Nobody moved immediately. Then Marcus stood. His heart pounded harder with every step. When he opened the door, his mother stood there. Rain covered her coat. Her gray hair was damp. She looked exhausted, more exhausted than he had ever seen her. For a moment nobody spoke, then her eyes found Eleanor. Everything else disappeared. Marcus watched both women freeze. Neither cried, neither rushed forward. The distance between them felt far too large for that. His mother stepped inside. The apartment door closed behind her. Silence remained. Finally she whispered one word, "Eleanor." Eleanor didn't answer, she simply stared. Years of anger sat behind her eyes, years of questions, years of wounds. Marcus suddenly felt like an outsider standing inside someone else's history. His mother slowly removed her coat. Her hands trembled. "I didn't know if you would stay. I almost didn't." The response was cold, honest. His mother nodded. "You have every right." Another silence followed. Then Marcus spoke. "You said there was something about Raymond." Both women turned toward him. His mother closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, she looked older, not physically, emotionally, like she had spent decades carrying something heavy. "Raymond didn't create the lie." Marcus frowned. That wasn't what he expected. He didn't? No. His mother's voice remained steady. "But he helped keep it alive." Eleanor laughed without humor. "That's supposed to make him look better?" "No." The answer came immediately. His mother looked directly at her daughter. "It makes me look worse." The room fell silent again. Marcus sat down slowly. Something important was finally happening. The truth wasn't arriving all at once, but cracks were appearing. His mother reached into her purse. She removed several folded documents, old papers, worn from handling. Marcus instantly recognized some of the names. Raymond, Helen, Eleanor. His mother placed them carefully on the table. "I never stopped looking for these." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "The originals." Marcus leaned forward. "Originals of what?" His mother hesitated. Then she pushed the documents toward him. "Read the dates." Marcus opened the first page. His pulse quickened. The document was over 30 years old. Legal language covered most of the page. Asset transfer, beneficiary modification, estate restructuring. The terms were complicated, but one thing became immediately clear. Eleanor's name appeared repeatedly, then disappeared halfway through the paperwork. Marcus turned another page, and another. His stomach tightened. This wasn't random. Someone had deliberately removed Eleanor from a series of inheritance arrangements. Not once, several times. Each revision pushed her farther away. Each signature made the separation more permanent. Marcus looked up. "Why?" His mother didn't answer immediately. "Eleanor did, because I became inconvenient." The bitterness in her voice filled the room. His mother flinched. Marcus noticed. That reaction mattered. It wasn't defensive, it was guilty. A dangerous realization began forming. Maybe Raymond wasn't the original villain. Maybe he had simply inherited a secret someone else started. Marcus looked at his mother. "What exactly happened?" She stared at the documents. For several seconds she seemed unable to speak. Then she surprised both of them. "I was trying to save the family." Eleanor immediately stood. "There it is." Her voice rose. "The excuse." "No." Helen shook her head. "It isn't an excuse. It sounds exactly like one." Marcus watched the tension explode. Years of silence had finally found a voice. Eleanor paced across the room. "I lost my place in the family." "You lost much more than that." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I know, do you?" The question hung in the air. Pain filled every word. Marcus suddenly understood something important. Eleanor didn't just want answers. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted someone to admit the damage. His mother finally whispered, "Not a day passed that I didn't regret it." Eleanor stopped walking. For a brief second vulnerability crossed her face, then anger returned. "Regret doesn't change anything." "No." Helen nodded. "It doesn't." The honesty surprised everyone, including Marcus. There was no self-defense, no attempt to justify, only exhaustion. Then Helen reached into her purse again. This time she removed something smaller, a key, old brass, worn smooth with age. Marcus frowned. "What is that?" His mother's fingers tightened around it. "The reason I was behind that dumpster." The room instantly went still. Eleanor looked confused. Marcus felt a chill. For days he had wondered why she was searching through garbage, why she seemed terrified, why she wasn't looking for food. Now he finally had part of the answer. His mother placed the key on the table. "It's for a lockbox." Marcus leaned forward. "What locks?" "Lock a metal box." "Where?" Her eyes lowered, hidden. The answer frustrated him immediately. But she continued before he could interrupt. "Years ago I hid documents." Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate. "What documents?" "The truth." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The word landed heavily. Helen looked between them. I knew one day Raymond would try to destroy everything. Eleanor stared at her. What are you talking about? Helen swallowed hard. The proof. Marcus felt the room shift beneath him. Proof. Not memories, not accusations, proof. His mother looked at the key again. I spent months searching for it. Marcus suddenly understood. The dumpster, the abandoned property, the desperate digging. She hadn't been searching for food. She had been searching for evidence. Evidence she believed someone wanted erased. Marcus stood. Where is the lockbox now? His mother slowly raised her eyes. Fear appeared again, the same fear he saw behind the shopping center. That's the problem. What problem? Helen's voice dropped almost to a whisper. The building where I hid it was demolished years ago. A heavy silence followed. Then Eleanor spoke. If that's true, how do you know it still exists? Helen looked directly at her. Because someone found it before I did. Marcus felt every muscle in his body tighten. Who? Helen opened her mouth, then stopped. Her face turned pale. She was staring at something, or someone, outside the apartment window. Marcus followed her gaze. Across the street, parked beneath the rain, sat a black SUV. The driver's door opened, and Raymond stepped out. Raymond stood beneath the rain, looking directly at the apartment building. Nobody inside the room spoke. Marcus felt tension spread through his chest. His mother had gone completely pale. Eleanor looked furious, and outside Raymond wasn't moving. He simply stood there beside the SUV, waiting, almost as if he knew exactly where they were. What is he doing here? Marcus asked. His mother didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded defeated. He knows. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Of course he knows. Marcus turned toward them. Knows what? Neither woman answered. The silence itself became an answer. Raymond had been following the situation long before Marcus understood it. A knock echoed through the apartment. Everyone flinched. One sharp knock, then another. Marcus moved first. Eleanor grabbed his arm. Don't. He looked at her. We can't do this forever. Another knock sounded. This one louder, more insistent. Marcus walked toward the door. His mother looked ready to stop him. Instead, she lowered her eyes. For decades, everyone in this family had avoided the truth. That strategy clearly wasn't working. Marcus opened the door. Raymond stood there holding an umbrella. His expression revealed nothing. No anger, no fear, no surprise, only exhaustion. I thought I'd find you here. Marcus folded his arms. Why? Raymond glanced past him, toward Helen, toward Eleanor. His eyes lingered on both women. Then he sighed, because the secret was never going to stay buried forever. Nobody invited him inside. He stepped in anyway. The apartment suddenly felt too small for all of them. 4 people. 4 different versions of the same history. Marcus remained standing between Raymond and the others. Not deliberately, it just happened. A protective instinct. Something in him no longer trusted anyone completely, Raymond noticed. His expression softened briefly, then disappeared again. So Eleanor said coldly, "Here we are." Raymond nodded. "Yes. You followed us. Yes, you knew where I lived. Yes." The honesty surprised everyone, even Eleanor. She stared at him. How long? Raymond looked away. A long time. The answer landed heavily. Marcus suddenly remembered chapter after chapter of unanswered questions. One of them finally had a face. "You knew where Eleanor was for 30 years, Marcus asked. Raymond nodded slowly. Helen closed her eyes. Eleanor looked like she wanted to throw something at him. "You watched my life from a distance?" Raymond's voice remained calm. "I checked on you. That's not an answer. It is the truth." The bitterness in Eleanor's laugh filled the room. "You checked on me while I lost everything. I made sure you survived." That statement changed the atmosphere instantly. Marcus noticed it. So did Eleanor. The anger remained, but curiosity slipped through. "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. Raymond rubbed his forehead. For the first time he looked tired, old. "You think I spent 30 years stealing, didn't you?" Eleanor asked. Raymond ignored the question. Instead he looked toward Helen. "Tell them." Helen shook her head immediately. "No, tell them." "No." Marcus watched panic appear in her face. Real panic. The same panic he'd seen behind the dumpster. The same panic he'd seen every time Eleanor's name surfaced. Raymond's voice hardened. "The lie has already destroyed enough lives." Eleanor stood. "No." She pointed at him. "You don't get to talk about destruction." Raymond accepted the accusation without defending himself. That surprised Marcus. Most guilty people fought back. Raymond looked almost resigned, as if he'd been expecting this confrontation for years. Finally, Marcus stepped forward. I'm done with half-truths. Nobody interrupted him. I'm done with hints. His voice grew stronger. No more protecting people. No more hiding. No more deciding what I can handle. He looked directly at Raymond. Why was Eleanor removed from the family? Raymond stared at him, then looked at Helen, then back at Marcus. The room became completely silent. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because your mother signed the papers. Eleanor laughed. We already know that. No. Raymond shook his head. You know she signed them. He pointed toward the documents on the table. You don't know why. Marcus immediately focused. That mattered. Because it aligned with everything he'd discovered so far. The signatures existed. The motive remained hidden. Raymond walked slowly toward the table. Then he placed something beside the old brass key. A folded document. Nobody had seen him carrying it. Marcus frowned. What is that? Raymond didn't answer. Instead, he unfolded the paper carefully. The document looked ancient, official, stamped, notarized. Marcus immediately noticed a familiar name, Eleanor Brooks, then another, Helen Hale. His pulse quickened. What am I looking at? Raymond looked directly at him. The beginning. Helen suddenly stood. No, the word came out sharp, desperate. Raymond didn't move, no more hiding. Helen's hands trembled visibly. Tears filled her eyes. Marcus had never seen her this afraid. Eleanor noticed too. For the first time, some of her anger gave way to confusion. Because this wasn't the behavior of someone protecting herself. This was the behavior of someone protecting something else. Something bigger, something worse. Raymond pointed toward the document. Read the first paragraph. Marcus obeyed. The legal language was dense, complicated. But one sentence stood out immediately. The document referenced a family inheritance dispute involving a deceased relative. Marcus read it again, then again. Something didn't make sense. The estate described in the document was enormous, far larger than anything his family should have possessed. Millions of dollars, property holdings, investment accounts, land. Marcus looked up. This can't be right. Raymond nodded. It is. Eleanor stepped closer. Marcus continued reading. Then he froze. A new name appeared. One he had never seen before. Margaret Brooks. The surname caught his attention instantly. Brooks, the same surname Eleanor used. The same surname appearing throughout the hidden paperwork. Marcus looked at Eleanor. She looked equally confused. Who is Margaret Brooks? Nobody answered immediately. Then Raymond said something that changed everything. She's the reason Eleanor lost her place in the family. Marcus felt the room shift beneath him. Not because the answer explained anything. Because it created 10 new questions. Who was Margaret? Why did she matter? And what connection could she possibly have to an inheritance worth millions? Marcus looked back down at the document. His eyes moved across another paragraph, then stopped. A handwritten notation appeared near the bottom. Different ink, different handwriting. One line, only one. Marcus read it silently, then his heart nearly stopped. The note claimed that Eleanor was the primary beneficiary of the entire estate. He slowly raised his eyes. The room had gone completely silent. Eleanor looked stunned. Helen looked devastated. And Raymond looked like a man who had spent 30 years waiting for this exact moment. Then Marcus noticed something else. A second page was attached behind the first, half hidden, partially folded, bearing only one signature, his mother's. And whatever was written on that page had made Eleanor lose everything. Nobody moved. The second page lay on the table between them like a loaded weapon. Marcus reached for it first. His mother grabbed his wrist. The movement was sudden, desperate. For a moment, nobody breathed. Helen, Raymond said quietly. It's over. Tears rolled down her face. No, she whispered, not like this. Eleanor stared at her. For the first time since arriving in Detroit, the anger in her eyes seemed mixed with fear. Because she could see it now. Whatever was written on that page was bigger than money, bigger than inheritance, bigger than Raymond. Marcus gently pulled his hand free, then he unfolded the paper. The room remained silent as he read a legal declaration, signed 32 years earlier, witnessed, notarized, filed. Marcus scanned the first paragraph, then the second. His eyes widened. What is this? Nobody answered. He read again to make sure he hadn't misunderstood. The document wasn't removing Eleanor from the inheritance. It was replacing her. Marcus looked up slowly. His mother had stopped crying. She simply looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that took decades to build. Eleanor stepped forward. What does it say? Marcus struggled to answer. His throat felt dry. It says, he looked back down, it says the estate was transferred to another beneficiary. Eleanor frowned. What beneficiary? Marcus read the name aloud. Margaret Brooks. The room went still again. Raymond closed his eyes. Helen lowered her head. Eleanor looked confused. Marcus looked confused. Only one thing was obvious. Everything connected back to Margaret Brooks. The woman nobody had explained. The woman whose name kept appearing in the documents. Eleanor folded her arms. Then tell me who she is. Raymond looked toward Helen. Helen didn't. Finally, Raymond spoke. She was your aunt. Eleanor blinked. My aunt? Your mother's older sister. Marcus immediately saw another crack appear in the story. An older sister, an enormous estate, missing inheritance rights, a hidden family member, nothing fit together. Why would Margaret leave everything to Eleanor? He asked. Raymond answered immediately, because Eleanor was the only person she trusted. The words hit the room hard. Helen began crying again. Eleanor looked stunned. Marcus could barely process it. According to the documents, Margaret had intended Eleanor to inherit nearly everything. Yet somehow Eleanor had ended up with nothing. And Raymond had spent 30 years controlling the aftermath. Marcus looked at his uncle. You knew this entire time. Yes, and you said nothing. Yes, why? Raymond laughed bitterly. Because nobody would have believed me. Marcus almost lost his temper. What does that even mean? Raymond stepped toward the window. Rain still struck the glass outside. Detroit looked gray, heavy, like the city itself was carrying the weight of old mistakes. When Margaret died, Raymond said the estate was drowning in lawsuits. He turned around. Creditors, property disputes, tax claims. Marcus listened carefully. The explanation sounded plausible. Complicated estates often became legal nightmares. But it still didn't explain Eleanor, or Helen, or the signatures. Raymond continued. The lawyers told Helen she had two choices. Helen covered her face. Marcus felt dread building. Two choices. Never a good phrase in family tragedies. Either allow the estate to pass directly to Eleanor, he paused, or transfer control temporarily while the legal battles were resolved. Marcus understood immediately. Temporary, the most dangerous word in family history. Because temporary decisions had a way of becoming permanent. Eleanor stared at her mother. You chose the second option. Helen nodded weakly. Tears slipped through her fingers. I thought it would protect you. Eleanor laughed. Not because it was funny, because it hurt too much. Protect me? Hear me out. No. Eleanor stepped back. No more excuses. Marcus watched both women. For years he had imagined a simple story. A victim, a villain, a hero. Now there were none. Only damaged people carrying different pieces of the same disaster. Raymond opened a folder he had brought with him. More papers, more records, more evidence. This wasn't the only document. Marcus immediately focused. What else? Raymond slid several copies across the table. Financial statements, court filings, property valuations, correspondence between attorneys. Marcus began reviewing them. The deeper he looked, the worse it became. Millions had vanished, properties had been sold, assets liquidated, legal fees accumulated year after year. By the time the estate finally settled, only a fraction remained. Eleanor looked horrified. You're saying there was nothing left? Raymond hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Marcus noticed it instantly. So there was something left. Raymond didn't answer. Marcus pushed harder. How much? A long silence followed. Then Raymond finally spoke. Enough. Eleanor laughed again. The sound was sharp this time, almost dangerous. Enough for what? Raymond stared at the floor. Enough for someone to get rich. The room exploded. Eleanor stood. Marcus stood. Even Helen looked shocked because for the first time Raymond had admitted it. Not theft, not exactly, but profit, benefit, gain. Somewhere inside 30 years of lies, Raymond had made money. A lot of money. Marcus stepped closer. How much? Raymond didn't answer. How much? Marcus repeated. The older man looked exhausted, like a dam finally beginning to crack. Then he said a number. Marcus felt sick. Eleanor went completely silent. Helen looked like she might collapse. The figure was enormous, life-changing. Enough to explain everything. Enough to explain why Raymond had protected the secret for decades. Enough to explain why he always resisted questions. Enough to explain why Eleanor had remained erased. Marcus suddenly understood one thing. This had never been about protecting the family. Not entirely. It had also been about protecting Raymond. The realization settled over the room like poison. But then Raymond said something unexpected, something nobody saw coming. It wasn't just me. Marcus froze. Eleanor froze. Even Helen looked up. Raymond's eyes moved toward Helen, slowly, painfully, then away again. I wasn't the only one who benefited. The room became dangerously quiet. Helen looked terrified. Not guilty, terrified. Marcus had seen that look before, behind the dumpster, at the apartment. Whenever the past got too close, and suddenly he realized something. His mother had never seemed afraid of exposure. She seemed afraid of what exposure would reveal. Marcus looked back at the stack of documents. There had to be more. He began turning pages, one after another, property records, legal settlements, bank accounts, attorney correspondence. Then he found something different. An envelope, old, yellowed, sealed. The handwriting across the front stopped him cold. It belonged to Margaret Brooks. The envelope was addressed directly to Eleanor, never opened, never delivered. Dated 1 week before Margaret's death. Marcus slowly lifted his eyes. Nobody in the room appeared to know the letter existed. Not Eleanor, not Helen, not even Raymond. For the first time that night, Raymond looked genuinely surprised, and Marcus realized they had just uncovered a secret that had been hidden from all of them. He carefully broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The moment he saw the picture, the blood drained from his face. Because standing beside Margaret Brooks was a man Marcus recognized instantly. A man who should have had absolutely nothing to do with this family. Marcus stared at the photograph so long that the edges of the paper began to bend beneath his fingers. The man standing beside Margaret Brooks was not a stranger. He was Charles Benton, the founder of Benton Urban Development, the man whose company Marcus had spent 6 months negotiating to acquire, the same acquisition that had brought him back to Detroit. Nobody spoke. Raymond stepped closer. "What is it?" Marcus handed him the photo. The older man's face immediately lost color. Helen looked up. Eleanor watched the reaction and understood something was terribly wrong. "Who is he?" she asked. Marcus answered before Raymond could. "Charles Benton." Eleanor frowned. "The developer?" Marcus nodded. The room grew quiet again, because Charles Benton was not some forgotten businessman from the past. He was alive, powerful, and still one of the most influential real estate figures in the Midwest. Raymond slowly lowered the photograph. "I haven't heard that name in years." Marcus looked at him sharply. "You knew him." "It wasn't a question," Raymond sighed. "Everybody involved knew him." Helen closed her eyes. The reaction told Marcus everything. This wasn't a coincidence. Charles Benton belonged inside the story. The question was how. Marcus unfolded Margaret's letter. The paper was fragile with age. The handwriting remained steady. Margaret had known she was running out of time when she wrote it. The first paragraphs were addressed directly to Eleanor. Apologies, regrets, warnings. Then Marcus reached a sentence that changed everything. "If anything happens to me, do not trust Charles Benton with the properties on Woodmere Avenue." Marcus read it twice, then a third time. Eleanor stepped closer. "What does that mean?" Marcus continued reading. Margaret described meetings, property transfers, pressure from investors. She claimed Benton had been quietly acquiring land around several neighborhoods years before public redevelopment plans became known. Nothing illegal appeared on the surface. But Margaret clearly believed something dishonest had happened. More importantly, she believed Eleanor had become an obstacle. Marcus lowered the letter. His mind raced. Woodmere Avenue. He knew that address. The properties there were now worth millions. Entire blocks had been transformed. What had once been neglected neighborhoods had become prime investment territory. Raymond sat heavily in a chair. For the first time he looked old. Not manipulative, not defensive, just tired. Helen finally spoke. Margaret never trusted him. Marcus turned toward her. "Why?" Helen hesitated. Because she had spent years hiding the truth. Every answer felt like another betrayal. Finally she whispered, "Because Margaret believed he wanted Eleanor out of the picture." The room froze. Eleanor stared at her mother. "What are you talking about?" Helen struggled to continue. Margaret thought the inheritance wasn't the real target. Marcus felt a chill. "Then what was? What was the target?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. The silence itself became frightening. Finally Raymond spoke. The land. Marcus already suspected it, but hearing it aloud made everything worse, because land meant money, power, influence, motives large enough to destroy families. Raymond leaned forward. Those properties looked worthless back then. He pointed toward the old records. Most people thought Margaret was crazy for holding on to them. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood real estate. He understood speculation. Sometimes worthless land became a fortune decades later. The timing fit too well. Eleanor crossed her arms. "You're telling me my entire life was destroyed because of land?" "No," Raymond said quietly. "Because people got greedy." Nobody argued. The statement felt too close to the truth. Marcus looked again at Margaret's letter. Another paragraph caught his attention. This time his heartbeat quickened. Margaret had written about documents, original ownership records, agreements, evidence. She claimed copies existed, and she claimed someone was trying to make them disappear. Marcus immediately thought about the lockbox. The box Helen had been desperately searching for behind the demolished storage lot. Suddenly the opening mystery made complete sense. She hadn't been searching for memories, she had been searching for evidence. Evidence connected to Margaret, evidence connected to Benton, evidence connected to Eleanor, and possibly evidence connected to Raymond. Marcus felt the entire story shifting again. Every revelation answered one question, while creating three more. He folded the letter carefully. "We need to find those records." Raymond laughed bitterly. "If they still exist." Helen looked up immediately. "They exist." Everyone turned toward her. The certainty in her voice surprised them. For the first time in days, she sounded completely sure of something. Marcus stepped closer. "How do you know?" "Because I saw them." "When?" Helen swallowed hard. "The day Margaret died." The room fell silent. Marcus waited. So did Eleanor. Years of pain sat between them, but for this moment they wanted the same thing. The truth. Helen's hands trembled. "Margaret showed me everything." Marcus felt tension building again. "What everything?" "The ownership records, the agreements, the letters." Her voice cracked. "And the names." Marcus exchanged a glance with Raymond. "The names, plural. Not one person. More than one." That mattered. A lot. Because it suggested a larger conspiracy than they had imagined. Not simply Raymond, not simply Benton, others. Unknown people hidden inside decades of silence. Eleanor sat down slowly. Her anger remained, but now confusion had joined it. Every answer seemed to move her farther from certainty. If Margaret knew all this, she asked quietly, why didn't she expose it herself? Helen's expression changed. A shadow crossed her face, the same shadow Marcus had seen behind the dumpster. Fear, real fear, because she tried. Nobody moved. Helen stared at the floor. She tried. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What happened? Helen looked toward the rain outside. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she whispered words that changed the room. 2 days before she died, someone broke into her house. Eleanor went pale. Marcus immediately leaned forward. What? The police called it a burglary. Helen shook her head. Margaret never believed that. The silence that followed felt heavy, because everyone reached the same conclusion. If Margaret possessed evidence worth millions and someone had entered her home shortly before her death, then perhaps the inheritance dispute had never been only a family conflict. Marcus grabbed the photograph again. His instincts screamed that Charles Benton remained central to everything, but instincts were not proof. He needed evidence, real evidence, and for the first time he knew exactly where to look. He pulled out his phone. His legal team still had access to every document collected during the acquisition process, every corporate disclosure, every archived property record, every buried transaction. If Benton Urban Development had touched Margaret's land, there would be traces. Marcus began sending messages immediately. Raymond watched him carefully. What are you doing? Digging. Raymond nodded slowly. Then something unexpected happened. The older man reached into his coat pocket. He removed a small brass key, worn, scratched, old. Marcus stared at it. So that's what you've been hiding. Raymond shook his head. No. He placed the key on the table. This is what I've been afraid of. Helen suddenly looked terrified, far more terrified than before. She stood so quickly her chair nearly fell backward. No. Raymond ignored her. Eleanor stared at the key. What does it open? Raymond looked directly at Marcus. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. A safe deposit box. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Because he already knew what came next. Raymond's eyes moved toward Helen, then back to Marcus. The original records are inside. The room went silent. Then Raymond delivered the final blow. And according to the bank records, the box was never registered under Margaret Brooks. He paused. It was registered under your mother's name. The safe deposit box changed everything. The records inside took months to verify. Lawyers reviewed them. Financial investigators traced transactions. Property experts reconstructed decades of ownership changes. No single document solved the mystery. Together, they revealed the truth. Margaret Brooks had been right. Charles Benton and several business partners had quietly positioned themselves to profit from land that ordinary families believed was worthless. Raymond had discovered pieces of the scheme years ago. Instead of exposing everything, he chose a different path. He used his control over family assets to protect himself financially while keeping the larger secret buried. Helen had learned the truth too late. By then, Eleanor had already been pushed out of the inheritance structure. Lawsuits were underway. Money had changed hands. Powerful people had become involved. And Helen made the worst decision of her life. She stayed silent, not because she hated Eleanor, not because she wanted wealth, because she was terrified. Terrified that exposing everything would destroy what remained of the family. Terrified that she would lose Marcus. Terrified that nobody would believe her after signing the documents herself. That fear became 30 years of damage. The legal consequences arrived slowly but steadily. Raymond was never accused of creating the original scheme. The evidence did not support that, but investigators uncovered financial misconduct tied to accounts he controlled for years. Civil actions followed. Settlements followed. His reputation collapsed long before any courtroom decision became final. For the first time in decades, Raymond stopped trying to defend himself. He sold properties, cooperated with investigators, accepted responsibility where he could. It did not erase what happened. Nothing could. But the cycle of lies finally ended. Helen did not live long enough to see every legal battle conclude. Her heart had been weakening for months. One quiet evening, Marcus and Eleanor sat beside her hospital bed. The tension that had once filled every room between them had changed into something more complicated. Not forgiveness, not completely, but honesty. And honesty was more than they had possessed for decades. Helen looked smaller than Marcus remembered. The woman who once searched through garbage behind a shopping center now seemed free of the fear that had haunted her. She reached for Eleanor's hand first, then Marcus's. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I was protecting everyone. Nobody interrupted. I kept waiting for the right time to tell the truth. Her voice weakened, but every year it became harder. Eleanor squeezed her hand. The pain remained. The lost years remained. Yet for the first time, Helen was no longer hiding. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. Eleanor cried quietly. Marcus looked away for a moment. Some wounds healed slowly, some never healed at all. But the truth had finally reached the surface, and that mattered. A few hours later, Helen passed away peacefully. No dramatic or final speech, no miracle, just silence, and the end of a burden she had carried for most of her life. The funeral was small. Marcus insisted on that. No cameras, no business associates, no public spectacle, only family, only people who had known the cost of the story. Afterward, Marcus and Eleanor sat together in front of the building that had once seemed impossible. Second Chance House. The center struggled during its first year. Many residents distrusted Marcus. Some believed it was a publicity stunt. Others remembered the headlines, the billionaire, the hidden inheritance, the family scandal. Marcus never argued. He showed up every day instead. He repaired rooms, met with residents, funded operations when donations fell short, listened more than he spoke. Slowly trust grew, not because of his money, because of his consistency. Eleanor became the heart of the center. She understood abandonment in ways Marcus never could. She organized programs for isolated seniors, helped residents navigate paperwork, sat with people who simply needed someone to listen. For the first time in her life, she stopped feeling erased. Her name returned to family records, to property histories, to legal documents. But more importantly, it returned to family conversations. She was no longer the missing person in the story. She belonged. 2 years later, reporters asked Marcus during a public interview whether he considered himself the hero of the situation. The question made him uncomfortable. He shook his head. No. The audience waited. Marcus glanced toward Eleanor, who stood across the room speaking with several residents. Then he answered, I spent years believing money solved problems. His voice remained calm. I sent checks and assumed that meant I was helping. The room grew quiet. I should have been present. I should have asked more questions. I should have seen what was happening. He paused. The people who deserve credit are the ones who kept searching for the truth long after it became painful. The interview spread online. Many expected a polished public relations response. Instead, they saw something rarer: accountability. Not perfection, not heroism. Years passed. Second Chance House survived, then grew, then became part of the community. Nothing happened overnight, no miracle transformation, no global foundation. Just one building, then another program, then another group of seniors receiving support and dignity. Exactly the kind of work Helen would have wanted. One afternoon, Marcus stood alone in the lobby. Sunlight filtered through the windows. Residents laughed somewhere down the hall. Life moved forward. On the wall hung a bronze plaque. Visitors stopped to read it every day. Marcus read it again. The words never lost their power. They were Helen's final written statement. The truth she wanted remembered after everything else faded. The worst thing a family can do is decide one person no longer belongs. Marcus stood there for a long time. Then Eleanor joined him. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The truth had arrived late. It had cost too much. But dignity had finally been restored. And for the first time in decades, the family story belonged to everyone who had lived it. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. And never underestimate what one honest conversation can change.